You've heard the term human rights a million times, right? But what does it actually mean to have a right? I mean, really think about it. It's this huge idea that shapes, well, everything. Our laws, our societies, how we live our lives every single day. So, let's break it down.
Yeah, really think about it for a second. When you say something like, I have a right to free speech, what are you actually saying? Who does that claim apply to? Who has to make sure you get that right? It seems so simple on the surface, but wow, the answer is way more complex than you'd think. And that's exactly what we're going to dig into today.
Okay, so here's our game plan. To get a real handle on this, we're going to build this thing from the ground up. First, we'll tackle the basic idea of what a right even is. Then, we'll get into the special sauce, what makes human rights so unique. After that, we'll see how they're all sorted out, why they matter so much in the real world, and then, this is the really interesting part, we'll flip it over and look at the other side of the coin, our responsibilities.
All right, let's dive in. First things first, before we can even touch human rights, we got to get super clear on what a right is, period. So at its absolute core, a right is basically a justified claim. Think of it like an entitlement you possess. It could be something official, like the legal right to a fair trial that's written down in law, or it could be more of a moral thing, like the right to be treated with respect. In either case, what you're really doing is claiming that other people, or society as a whole, have a duty to behave in a certain way towards you.
And here's a really crucial distinction you need to know. Rights can basically be split into two big buckets. You've got positive rights and negative rights. Positive rights entitle you to something. They need other people to act. So your right to vote, that's a positive right. For it to work, someone has to actually set up a polling place, print ballots, and count them. Now, negative rights are the opposite. They protect you from something. They just require others to, well, not act, to leave you alone. The right not to be tortured is a perfect example. All that requires is for no one to torture you. See the difference? Action versus inaction? It's a huge deal in law and politics.
Okay, so now we know what a right is in general. But what's the big deal about human rights? What makes them so special? Let's get into what I like to call their core DNA, the stuff that makes them totally unique. First up, and this is maybe the most radical part of the whole idea, they are universal. That means they belong to everyone, everywhere, period. It doesn't matter what your passport says, what you look like, who you love, or what you believe. These aren't privileges you have to earn or that someone can grant you. Nope, they're your birthright, just for being human. End of story.
Number 2, they are inalienable. That's a fancy word that just means they can't be taken away from you, ever. You can't sell them, you can't give them away. And no government, no power on earth can just decide to take them away. They are a fundamental, absolutely non-negotiable part of who you are.
And third, they're not set in stone. Human rights are dynamic. They're alive. They evolve. Think about it. As our societies change and our understanding grows, what it means to live a dignified life also changes. That's exactly why today we're talking about things like a right to a clean environment or a right to digital privacy. Ideas that, 100 years ago just weren't on the radar.
Now, all of these ideas are kind of held together by a few other core principles. At the end of the day, human rights are all about human dignity. They're also a critical check on the power of the state, and they insist that every single person be treated as an equal. But, and this is super important to remember, they're almost never absolute. There can be limitations, especially when one person's rights bump up against someone else's.
Okay, so we've got the DNA down. We know what makes human rights tick. But how does this all work in the real world? How are these rights organized? Let's take a look at the different buckets they fall into. A good way to picture this is like building a house. The foundation is what we call natural or moral rights. These are the big philosophical ideas about fairness and justice that we all kind of feel in our gut. They aren't always written down as laws, but they're backed by, public conscience. Then, built on top of that foundation, you have the legal rights. These are the ones that are officially on the books, enforced by the state. If someone violates one of these, you can take them to court.
And those legal rights, they branch out into a few key areas that cover pretty much all of our lives. You have civil rights, things like the right to life, liberty, and equality, that protect our personal freedom. Then there are political rights, which are all about participating in society, like the right to vote or run for office. And finally, you have economic rights, which are all about making sure we can all live with dignity, the right to work, get fair pay, and have social security. Each one protects a totally different but totally vital part of being human.
Okay, that's a lot of categories and definitions. But let's get to the real question. So what? Why does any of this actually matter? What's the real-world impact of all these rights?
I think this quote just nails it.
Human rights aren't just some nice, abstract idea we talk about in a classroom. No way. They are a practical tool, a shield. They give us the words and, crucially, the legal power to stand up and fight back against abuse and corruption. And honestly, you see their impact everywhere you look. They are the reason we argue that everyone deserves basic things like food and shelter. They're how we protect the most vulnerable people in society. They give us the freedom to speak our minds and believe what we want. They open doors to education and work. And maybe most importantly, they give us a universal measuring stick to hold our governments accountable. They really are the bedrock of a fair and just society.
But we're not done just yet, because the story of rights is only half the story. For every single right we have, there's another side to the coin, a responsibility. And this is the part of the equation that we absolutely cannot forget.
So, what exactly is a responsibility? Well, it's pretty simple. It's a duty, an obligation. When we talk about it in the context of human rights, it's what we owe to each other and to our whole community to make sure that everyone's rights are actually protected.
And this is the fundamental deal, the social contract, if you will. You can't separate rights and responsibilities. They are completely inseparable, two sides of the exact same coin. Our ability to enjoy our rights is 100% dependent on all of us being willing to live up to our duties.
So what does that look like in the real world? Well, the most basic responsibility we have is just to respect the rights of other people. You know that old saying, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins? That's it right there. But it goes beyond that. It means we have a duty to follow the law, to contribute to our communities, to protect public property, and to take care of the planet we all depend on. And that brings us to our final big question, one to really chew on. If rights are what we are guaranteed, are responsibilities what we give in return? Is that the fundamental bargain of living together in a just society? It's a delicate balance, and it's one that every single generation has to figure out for itself. Thanks so much for joining me.